Dear children, let's recall the lessons learned from the Bhagavad Gita till now. The Gita highlights the need to have a calm mind. When Arjuna was confused about waging a war, Krishna advised him on how he could differentiate between what is dharma and what is adharma by listening to his inner conscience. This is a very important lesson for every student. A calm mind will help control your impulses during good and bad times and help you when you're upset or having difficulty in coping with any situation. Now the question arises, how do we get a calm mind? This is possible by practicing your daily sadhana, your daily prayers, that is silent meditation, chanting the Gayatri mantra, and also expressing gratitude. Another very important lesson that we learn here in the Gita is to develop the right perspective. Just before the Kurukshetra war was about to begin, Arjuna felt confused and dejected. It's okay to be confused, but it's very important to develop the right perspective and to understand what we should do, why we should do it, our role in the scheme of things, and then decide on the attitude or the decision that we need to take. Based on our experiences, we learn to think in a certain way. Gradually, we begin to believe that only our beliefs are right and those who differ from us are wrong. Important to understand the feelings of others, but it's not mandatory to agree with them. You must always look at situations from the viewpoint of others too. That is why when you're confused, it's always good to seek an expert opinion. Just the way Arjuna did at the battlefield by seeking an opinion from Krishna. Another very important lesson which one can learn from the Bhagavad Gita is to understand that change is the law of nature. Change in terms of matter, change in terms of relations, change in terms of roles. One must adjust, accept, and face the challenge every time. According to the Gita, everything has to change. We know that our body, feelings, emotions, and perceptions, as well as everything around us, is in a state of flux. Yet, when we are told that we need to change, we are reluctant to accept the advice or we oppose it. To be successful, an individual needs to adapt to new situations, innovate and come up with better solutions and explore new opportunities. So while you enjoy the experience of being in familiar surroundings, be ready to usher in reforms and have new experiences. This is what happened with Arjuna at the battlefield. He was not ready. He was not ready to fight his own family members. It was a change. They, for once, were on the opposite side. He just didn't know what to do. But this change, this need for fighting the war was there because by doing so, Krishna said Arjuna would be able to re-establish dharma back in the world. That is why this change was necessary. When Arjuna was confused at the battlefield, Krishna also gave him the knowledge about the Atma. This is another lesson for us. He told us that Atma, which is the spirit or the soul within us, is never born, never dies, and is everlasting. The Atma is separate from our human body. Our human body takes birth. We are initially a baby. Slowly we grow up, become an adult, then we become old, and the body dies. But not the Atma. The Atma or soul supports the body. Without Atma, the body becomes dead. Atma is the one, the consciousness, the supreme soul which supplies the power to our body, mind and senses, just as air burns and supports fire. In the Gita, Krishna told Arjuna not to grieve over the death of the body over the death of his relatives who he were fighting, because the Atma inside the body never dies, and the one and the same Atma dwells inside all bodies. From the story of Guru Drona and Arjuna, we learnt the need of having one-pointed focus. We must do our duty or work by putting our whole mind in it, without any worry of results. We must learn from our failures and go forward without letting our failures defeat us. To become a perfect person, it's very important to control or limit our desires. In the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, the trick is not to think about whether your work will be a success or a failure, whether it will please anyone or not, even whether it will make you happy or not, because thinking of results when you should be working will only distract you from the work itself. Men who do this, who think only about the higher purpose of the work and not about the results of that work, are the ones who are happy in the now always. Such a person has to be free of desire. Such a person does not need anything from the world to be happy. He is happy in himself. Success or failure, triumph or defeat, nothing affects such a person. He treats everyone, people who like him, people who don't, people who serve him, people whom he serves, with the same affection and respect. This is when Krishna tells Arjuna the secret for doing this. It's really all about controlling the senses. You see, most men seek to feed their senses endlessly. They want to be surrounded by beautiful things, lovely sounds, delicious food. They think about these sense objects all the time. If you keep thinking about such objects endlessly, you begin to get fond of them. You start getting attachment. Once you get fond of something, you want it for yourself. Attachment leads to desire. And if you can't have it for some reason, or if someone else has it, you get upset. That is anger. When you're upset and angry, your brain gets confused. You can't think straight anymore. You lose the ability to make rational judgments, and you end up doing something which is silly, hurtful, or plain unethical. Here's a short story which will illustrate why sealing on desires is important. There lived in ancient Greece a king. One day, while walking in his garden, he saw an elderly asleep there. Taking pity on him, the king let him go without punishment. Hearing about this, God rewarded the king with one wish. The king hastily said, "I wish that everything I touch should turn to gold." And so it was. When the king approached and touched the beautiful flowers in his garden, they stood rigid and golden. The king grew hungry and thin, for whenever he tried to eat, he found that his meal had turned to gold. His lovely daughter at his loving touch turned hard and fast to gold. His clothes, his bed, his friends, and eventually the whole palace was gold. The king feared his whole kingdom would turn to gold unless he did something right away. He asked God to return everything the way it had been and take back his golden touch. God took pity on him and granted his request. Instantly the king was poorer than before, but richer he felt in what really mattered. This king was none other than Midas. You must have surely heard about the Midas touch, the golden touch. The moral of the story is that desire without limits can lead to ruin. On an individual level, desires left unchecked translate to loss of peace. Bhagwan Satya Sai Baba has always insisted that every devotee should practice sealing on desires. Sealing on desires means one should not waste their time, energy, money and food. Nowadays, many children and individuals waste a lot of food. When they go to a restaurant, there's a lot of food piled up on the plate. With this food, a poor person back home can get a full meal. Hence, it's very important that we should eat in moderation by avoiding taking more than that what we can eat.
We should also save our time. Time should be used for productive purposes and should not be wasted. Money should also be put to use for good purpose only. We should not spend unnecessarily and increase our expenditure. It should be used as far as possible to help the needy. Energy should be conserved, and the best way to do this is by avoiding unnecessary talk. When we talk a lot, we waste a lot of energy. So speak softly, speak sweetly, and speak less.
Getting back to the story, Arjuna tells Krishna that he feels confused. On one side, Krishna was telling him to withdraw his senses, to have a ceiling on his desires, and on the other side, Krishna was urging him to fight a war against his closest family for the sake of the kingdom, for the sake of dharma, which was the right thing to do. In one breath, Krishna was telling him both the things. Arjuna was confused. This is when Krishna tells him the secret of Karma Yoga. One who practices Karma Yoga is called a Karma Yogi. A Karma Yogi finds a right way to serve and turns her or his work into worship. In Karma Yoga, no work is more important or less important than other work. When one considers work as an offering of gratitude, then that work becomes worship, that work brings joy. Though some people may earn more if they work for selfish gains, but they will never find permanent peace and happiness. Only those who do their duty selflessly for the good of all people will find real peace and satisfaction. A true Karma Yogi works hard even without personal gain. Only the ignorant work just for personal gain. The world runs smoothly because people do their duty. Parents work hard to support their family and the children do their part. Nobody can remain inactive or idle all the time. Most people engage in some activity and do what they can. Let's now hear the story of someone who was a true Karma Yogi, who was engaged in selfless service. A poor Scottish farmer one day, while trying to make a living for his family, heard a cry for help coming from a nearby swamp. He dropped his tools and ran to the place. There, sunk to his waist in the swamp, was a terrified boy, screaming and struggling to free himself. Farmer Fleming saved the lad from what could have been a slow and terrifying death. The next day, a fancy carriage pulled up to the Scotman's simple home. A well-dressed nobleman stepped out and introduced himself as the father of the boy that Farmer Fleming had saved. "I want to thank and repay you," said the nobleman. "You saved my son's life." "I can't accept payment for what I did," the Scottish farmer replied, rejecting the offer. At that moment, the farmer's own son came to the door of the family hovel. "Is that your son?" the nobleman asked. "Yes," the farmer replied proudly. "I'll make you a deal. Let me provide him with the level of education my own son will enjoy. If the lad is anything like his father, he will no doubt grow to be a man we both will be proud of." And that he did. Farmer Fleming's son attended the very best schools and in time graduated from St. Mary's Hospital Medical School in London and went on to become known throughout the world as the noted Sir Alexander Fleming, the discoverer of the medicine penicillin. Years afterward, the same nobleman's son who was saved from the swamp was stricken with pneumonia. What saved his life this time? Penicillin. The name of the nobleman? Lord Randolph Churchill. His son's name? The famous Sir Winston Churchill. Someone once said, "What goes round comes around." This is the universal law of karma, the law of cause and effect. Help fulfill someone's dream and your dream shall be fulfilled too by the Lord. The assignment for this week, children, is self-reflection. Please let us know how you practice sealing on desires in your life. Also, we want you to reflect on the lessons from the Bhagavad Gita. Please tell us how this has helped you or in which way is it applicable in this pandemic period.